business. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to a woman who, she is such a bright light. But it's not just that. It's that she's been able to go to a place that's so dark and still come out of it with her light shining so enormously. You know, in his New York Times bestseller, The Brain That Changes Itself, Dr. Norman Doidge profiles the story of Cheryl Schiltz. It's chapter 1. And she was in her late 30s when she entered the hospital for a routine surgery, and when she came out, her vestibular system had been destroyed. And let's just pause here to sort of identify your vestibular system is the reason you're sitting or standing up straight. It's the part of your inner ear that balances you. So if that part is destroyed, you, like Cheryl, would experience the difficulty of holding yourself upright. And what happened to Cheryl was that without her brain's capacity for balance, she became constantly falling over. That means sitting or standing, walking, it didn't matter. She was constantly falling over. And you can imagine if that's happening to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, life becomes unlivable. And then Cheryl was put in touch with Dr. Paul Bach-y-Rita, whose groundbreaking work with neuroscience gave Cheryl back not only her balance, but her life. And so today I'll be talking to Cheryl about how they retrained her brain to bring this back. And she is here with me. Cheryl's actually been majoring in the experience of disability since 1997, and here's how she describes it. When an adverse reaction to an antibiotic destroyed her vestibular system, she lost her sense of balance and any concept of knowing where she was in space, forcing her to literally relearn how to walk and introducing her to disability. Her experience was further compounded in 2010 when it was discovered that Cheryl had a brain aneurysm that required surgery. So as she puts it, the surgery was to clip the bubble. So Cheryl took part in a groundbreaking sensory substitution research experiment at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it was pioneered by Dr. Paul Bach-y-Rita, and she's been featured in many publications and TV reports. But this, I have to say, is her first radio show, so I'm very excited that we are getting to break her into a new medium. Cheryl has a BS in rehabilitation psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and her experience includes working and volunteering in vocational rehab, youth transition, independent living, and disability advocacy and support. She's embarked on a mission to share her insights by speaking from the inside of the experience of disability. And I think that's one of the things that I so admire about her. As you know, I speak from the inside of trauma and the post-trauma PTSD experience. And I think that, I'm always saying we don't heal in isolation, we heal in community. And a community is formed by sharing our voices and our stories. You can find more about Cheryl by visiting Facebook and on her blog, which is silencingyournoise.wordpress.com. It's my great pleasure to welcome Cheryl Schiltz. Welcome to Changing Direction. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well, and thank you so much, Michelle. It's a thrill to be here and to talk to you again, and I just really appreciate it.
I was thinking as I first read Dr. Norman Doidge's book, the very first chapter is all about you. And when I first read this story, of course, I didn't know you. I just couldn't help myself. I was compelled to find you after reading this chapter, and I searched you down on the internet. I just wanted to know the kind of person who would have the courage to be able to go through this experience and put in all the time, the dedication and commitment to healing. And I wanted to know, what's she doing now that everything has changed? So I want to hear about how all of this has sort of, when our lives change direction, we change. So I want to hear how all of it has changed you. Let's start. In the introduction, I pretty much gave a bottom line of your story. But let's start with me giving you the opportunity to share anything, other details that you think should be added to the background of where you came from.
Wow. Well, my life was buzzing along quite nicely as I worked as an inside sales rep for a local animal health distributor. And I loved that job. I had like the best job, or the best job in the world, and the best boss in the world. And things are really doing well. And I started having, some difficulty that ended up with a surgery, and what was supposed to be a routine hysterectomy turned into ending up with a really bad post-operative infection, which landed me back in the hospital. And then I was given the antibiotics that we referred to, and what happened is one of the antibiotics, called gentamicin, was it turns out it's a pretty powerful antibiotic, and what it can cause is ototoxicity. Oto meaning ear, toxicity meaning poisoning. So that's really what happened. I was in the hospital for 7 days and then 10 days at home, and I got home on a Sunday and got up after stopping the meds, and got up on a Wednesday and literally crumbled to the ground and to the floor. I could not move. I couldn't even crawl. I just could not figure out what was wrong with me. And it took some time for doctors to find out really what it was. Why is this going on? First it was an ear infection and gave me medicine, and that didn't help. And I went on, like you, search around on the internet, and I found out more about the antibiotic I was taking, and that's where it was. That's where I read the information, like, oh my goodness, this is what's going on with me. So that was the beginning of what I call the noise. It's like, but what was good about it is that I was able to figure out this is what's going on. So then after a lot of tests and whatnot, then it was confirmed. And so then, what do you do? I tried my best to go back to work, and it didn't work at all. I had the job that I had was about 50 miles from my house, so it was quite a commute every day, and I couldn't drive, obviously. And so I ended up leaving that position for a position that was much closer to my home, and that didn't work. And then, at the ripe age of, 39, I had to admit that I couldn't do what I used to be able to do, and had to apply for Social Security disability. And I was in a lull for a long time. It took a long time for me to get beyond it, but there was still this drive in me to find it, to use my voice. And I found information about the drug, and I found actually a support group that works with people that's all about this drug and this particular condition. And so then I really found my voice and started going on, like you said, the advocacy rampage. And
Cheryl, hold on just a second, because I want to get to that, but I don't want to skip over the really important part, or maybe you're getting to it. How in the world did you get hooked up with Dr. Paul Bach-y-Rita and the work that he was doing? And I really want you to describe, you all really changed your brain. So I would like for you to have an opportunity to share how you did that and how it changed things for you.
Well, Paul Bach-y-Rita called me out of the blue one day, and on referral of my doctor, and told me about this sensory substitution research they were doing, and invited me to join it. And I said, well, what do I got to lose, right? So I went, and the first time I used the device, I was actually using it going through a maze with my eyes closed, and only by feeling the sensations on my tongue. And I did it.
Cheryl, hold on just a second, because what was the device? I know there's been a couple of different iterations of it. In the book, Dr. Norman Doidge, in The Brain That Changes Itself, first you had a hat on, right? And then it became something like a little, like a wafer-sized sort of chip that you hold on your tongue?
Right. It started out as there was a helmet. It was a construction helmet, all kind of drilled out to make it light, and on the top of it was a computer board where there was a accelerometer in there. And from that were some wires, and it went to a computer where a ribbon came out, like a thick, 1 inch wide computer ribbon, and on the end of that were 144 little electrodes. And I placed that on my tongue, and the movement that my body would make would produce a movement on those electrodes. So I felt that on my tongue. So if my body was moving to the left, I would feel the sensation going to the left or the right or back or forward. So the object is to keep that in the center. So that was the basic concept of the device. And then what it did was morph into a more portable device that you hang around your neck. And it's much smaller, which is nice because you can take it with you wherever you want to go. I could only use the device back then in the lab. So by doing that, what was happening, what I know now, what was happening with that device was having that sensation on my center. All right. So when you think about that, we have a system of our perceptual system. And our systems include your basic orienting system, which is your vestibular organs, and then we have listening, touching, smelling, tasting, and looking. So all of that comes together as one perceptual system. So what was happening when they say that the brain changes itself, the self is kind of the main component to changing the brain, because it has to come from somewhere to get into the brain. The brain can't do that by itself. So what was happening to me by using that device was the sensation that I was feeling was really all about reconnecting me to my center, because that's what was missing. My vestibular plug was gone. And so by continuously doing that, reconnecting myself to that center through the use of this device, I was able to reconnect all of my perceptual systems. And that was how the change came into my brain. That's how the brain was changing myself. It's kind of like, think about when somebody has I can just use my own example for when I started physical therapy, when this happened. That I was completely unplugged. I had no sense of balance. It was horrifying. And going through physical therapy and doing these exercises over and over and over again. Well, all that is what this was perceptual learning. I was learning how to do that. There was more information coming in from my other systems, my touch, my sense, my looking, I'm listening, all of that stuff was involved with bringing those things back into me. So if you think about riding a bike, is a good example. That's perceptual learning. When you first start, you're all over the place, and then when you get really good at it, it's I got it. So it's what you're using is all of your muscles, all your sense of touch, and your what's going on, and if you have balance, you use your balance to learn how to ride that bike. That's how the brain is changing itself. Does that make sense?
Cheryl,
right?
Yeah, that's such a. It's so interesting to me that the brain can compensate, and that's a big point that the brain that changes itself makes, is that your brain, even when it's damaged in one area, can compensate by developing the cortical real estate in another area to sort of pick up the slack. So how long did that process take to retrain your brain in this way? And now let's just update before you answer that question, because I want to know how long it took so that we could really sort of have an idea of, how long brain change is in your particular case. But before we do that, today you can walk, you can talk, you can sit, you can stand, you can drive. You have a normal life. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, as well as normal can be. Yeah.
Well, what I mean is, let's call it functional, because I think after a traumatic experience, it's always the new normal.
Correct, right.
But you are balanced.
Right, I am. But I do want to emphasize, though, that I'm not cured. The device didn't cure me. I still have the bilateral vestibular dysfunction. But what happened is that, yes, there is a sense of compensation, which has all come from the learning that was taking place as I was using the device. And I used the device, really solidly for about 2 years. We tested it, like I was using it twice a day, every day, Monday through Friday. And then we tested it to see what would happen if I backed off. What if I missed a day? What if I missed a week? How do we do that? And then we just kept going. We just found that the residual kept growing and growing and growing and growing to the point where my whole sense of perceptual learning is just like everything just kind of came together. And I was able to just reintroduce myself to my environment in such an amazing way that I'm just able to do what I need to do, in whatever way I need to do it. There's so much compensation that goes on, and every day is a compensation, isn't it?
Yes, I think for all of us, you're so right. So now you've gotten a sense of your real life back, and you're doing something so important with it. How would you say this experience changed you and led to what you're doing today, which is really fantastic advocacy work?
Wow. I think how it changed me was it provided me a real close, in-depth, up-close, personal look at disability and how that feels internally, externally, socially. I mean, everything that's connected with it. Because when you have an acquired disability, what happens is that you get to see what it's like on the other side, and you probably never ever think about that otherwise. And the lessons that I learned from it, and seeing how people react to, and it was funny for me because it was, if I were sitting somewhere, people would just pass by me and, whatever. But as soon as I got up and started walking, then they're like, whoa, what's wrong? Then they take notice. Mm-hmm. So it was, I lived in a very parallel, two different kind of worlds. But, I don't think that the experience changed me in a way. I think that I just got stronger. And, as far as, my personality or identity, I think really my personality changed my experience. And it continues to do so. I'm just really, really blessed with a down deep and dirty will. And
my guest today, hold on, Cheryl, let me just tell everybody, if you're wondering how you can find out more about Cheryl Schiltz, who is my guest today, you can find out more about her at silencingyournoise.wordpress.com. Cheryl, let's talk about that idea of your personality and the role that it played, and go ahead with what you were thinking about that, and then I have a follow-up question.
Sure. I think that, like I said, my personality changed my experience. I mean, I think that I'm really quite blessed with a very high volume sense of optimism. And it was just internal will. I mean, just even when the experience first happened to me, I literally drove myself to the doctor. That was just ridiculously silly. I had no idea. I should not have been driving, but there was this will that I had in me, and it just continues that I'm just gonna make it. I'm gonna make it, and I think having that opportunity, to be able to use that in this experience helped me. And I think I'm just naturally very interested in science, and I think, boy, if anything, this experience has been the most magnificent experience of my life, because it has put me into a place of true understanding, of really being face-to-face with something that really puts you out of your comfort zone, and you have to sit and question why, And it took some time to get there. I mean, it's not like, okay, after I was diagnosed and they give me my diagnosis, that I said, okay, I'm going to go on now. No, it took several years. It took a couple of years, and my pivotal, I guess what you would call your biggest changing direction moment was when I stopped asking why, and that led then to acceptance. And when I made it to that spot, then I knew that I could just, now it's time to use what I lost. And that doesn't mean that what I lost really was still with me. I was just me in a different skin. I had to learn how to wear plaid and polka dot together, and like so.
Cheryl, I think let's stay there for a minute. I love what you just said. You were still you, just you in a different skin. Because I totally agree. I think so often we're overwhelmed by a sense of loss after a traumatic event, and then we really have to get to a place where we can learn, I still have elements of the person that I used to be that I really loved, and I can bring them forward. And that is a huge thing to learn. But I want to sit on the why question for a minute, because I just was saying to my mom last week, and she was with me through my whole trauma, and as you know, my trauma has a very similar origin to yours, an allergic reaction to an antibiotic. And through that experience, I became a full body burn victim. So I lost all of my skin head to toe. And when I came out of that experience, I asked the same question, like, why me? I'm like this 13-year-old kid. I've been good, like, why me? And my mom, really tried to help answer the question by giving me Harold Kushner's book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, and all that stuff. And it never quelled the question for me. And my mom and I were talking about this even just last week, and I was saying to her, at a certain point, you just stop asking why, and you start asking what am I supposed to do with all of this? Because I don't ever think there's a satisfactory answer to the question why. Do you?
Well, I don't think that there is an answer to why. That's what happened. I mean, I was sitting at my kitchen table, and this is what came out one day, and I have no idea where it came from, but it showed up, and it's to say, I often think, why did this happen to me? And I finally said, there are no answers. There is no answer to that why question. It is what it is, and you must move on and rejoice in the fact that you had all of those experiences to bring forward with you. You just get to use them in a different way. How exciting is that? How creative is that? How much fun is it to be able to redesign your life with all of those great experiences that you've already have, and to pull them forward and make them shine?
I love that idea. And I love also the idea that we know ourselves enormously different now because of these experiences that we've had, don't you think? Like, I really know I can count on myself in a crisis, and I might not have known that without this experience. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have liked to learn it another way, but I really know I can survive. And that's a comforting feeling. Did you ever think or feel that way?
Now that you say that, I guess, I mean, it is kind of nice to know that, son of a gun, I can make it through anything. If I can make it through that, I can do that. I mean, like when I, found I had the brain aneurysm, it's like, well, here we go again. It's like, I just decided all these little hits that I'm getting from time to time is just like another little degree in disability. So I decided that I now officially have my PhD. So, I'm just going with it. And each and every one of those experiences provides yourself and me and people like that have gone through similar experiences like us. It provides us a voice that comes from the inside that can really reach out to those that really need to hear this, and to also reach out to the general public and change their perceptions of disability. Because, when we were kids, before this ever happened to me, I don't know about you, but it was like you looked at people with disabilities in sort of a different way, right? It was something to maybe feel sorry about, whatever. But now it's more like, you get it. I know you get it, and you can just use your experience to really light up another pathway for somebody else who maybe hasn't thought about this, or thought that you could do it this way.
I totally agree. When I came out of the hospital and I was just a 13-year-old kid, so I didn't know how to act on this, but I remember literally walking out of the hospital, getting into my parents' car and thinking, how am I going to do something meaningful with all of this? I lived And up to 70% of the people that had what I had don't live. So I was very aware, I was, fortunate that I had survived, and I had this very overwhelming feeling of I'm supposed to do something with this, but I don't know what. And it took me 30 years to figure out what I was supposed to do with it, but that's okay. Because sometimes that's our journey. We don't always know. But right. You're doing that now, and I think it's so amazing now how you've not only changed your brain, but changed your life. And you have you said earlier that you have optimism, and I think that's a very hard thing to facilitate inside, and yet you exude it. So where did that come from, and how do you access it on a daily basis?
Wow, maybe it's just good old farm country growing up living. I don't know. I got an extra sprinkle of something. I really don't know. I wish I knew.
Well, for somebody who didn't get, you got an extra sprinkle and it took away from somebody else. So
no. Now I'm sprinkling it for other people. I mean,
yeah,
I'm
exactly. So here's that's exactly where I was going. For somebody who feels they didn't get their fair share of optimism, and I certainly was one of those people. So I know my optimism and my perspective changed when I went through my PTSD recovery. But for somebody who right now is feeling, I need more optimism, but I don't even know how to do that, what kind of ideas would you suggest?
Well, I think that to really take inventory of all of the really good things that are in your life, and to step away from the noise of the stuff that's holding you there, that's holding you back from that. Be it your situation, be it your illness, whatever it is. I mean, I'm not saying that life is rosy. If you have a bad life, I mean, it is what it is. But how can you move from that? How can you start thinking in a different way and start using your perceptions and to change them and to realign the filters that are in our heads? Those things that when we see something, it comes into our brain, and it's like, I call it, I got, the little Rolodex of filters. It's like it comes in, you see it, our perception brings it in, and the filters go, oh, that's where that belongs there. But if you can see it in a different way and say, okay, I know that my illness, man, it just really is hard to deal with. But just to think about or pay attention to those little things that happen during the day that show and prove that you're making progress. To show that even if it's your child or granddaughter coming up and saying, I love you, that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. That's an optimistic thing. And
optimism, Cheryl, is optimism related then to gratitude? Is that what you would say?
Mm-hmm. Well, sure. I mean, I'm definitely grateful to be optimistic. I mean,
well, no. What I mean is, you're saying identify the things that are good, like somebody saying I love you, and so can we? I guess what I'm saying is, would you say that we can access a sense of optimism, which is hope, right? And a good feeling, positive feeling. We can access it through a sense of gratitude.
Well, I think we can, of course,
yeah.
Because when you pay attention to gratitude, that makes you happy, that makes you feel good, that helps you find that sense of optimism. Because it's good. It's good stuff. And it takes your mind away from the noise of the bad stuff.
True. My guest today is Cheryl Schiltz from the best-selling book, The Brain That Changes Itself. You can find out more about Cheryl at silencingyournoise.wordpress.com. Cheryl, we're coming into just the final moments of our segment, and I want to make sure that we touch on a topic that you and I have discussed, and that was the interaction between the self and the brain, and how the self changes the brain, and how perception changes the brain. And we started to touch on it a little earlier. I want to make sure we have a chance to really focus there. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that, for one, information has to come from somewhere in order for the brain to do something with it. right? So it's outside, and that something is perception, our perceptual systems. And our perceptual systems include all of our senses, which is the hearing or listening, touching, smelling, tasting, looking, seeing. Those are the 5 that we're familiar with. But however, there's that extra one that is our orienting system, which is our vestibular system. So when one of them gets wonky, the other ones, I think, get a little on the wonky side too, because they're used to being all collectively moving in a lovely, lovely way and very harmonic. And when one is pulled out, it can't do that anymore. So it's like, I liken it to your brain's got a whole bunch of cogs in it. And like for me with the vestibular cog just kind of went, and it stopped. And all the other stuff kind of tried to keep running, but when it got to that part, it was not right. So it threw everything off. And then little by little, especially with using the device, what happened is it provided that extra sense that I needed, that extra perceptual sense that I needed to get that cog rejuvenated and have it starting up and repaired. And now it's like, okay, it started again. Now everything is back into motion the way that it should be. And, and perception is, I think what we see is it really truly what we see. Because, as I mentioned before, the filters that we have, which come from our experiences and things that we've learned throughout our life, our values, all of these things that are placed into us from learning and growing up and experiences, work, play, all these kind of things that tell us, okay, that's what that means because I have this filter. And when those perceptions can sometimes throw us off, and when you see something a little more directly, then bypass those filters, it's a whole different thing, and that changes the brain. And I think that's kind of what happened with me is that I'm bypassing those filters. And the device, which is now called the BrainPort, it started out as the TDU, and now it's the BrainPort, is that it provided me an opportunity, an opening for that to happen to me. That I was able to be so silent with myself during the 20 minutes that you use the device. I mean, seriously silent, because it stopped the noise. It stopped me from moving. It recentered me. It gave me the connection that I needed to be able to stand still. And the more I used that, the more I began to feel that how do I say it? Just kind of a re-educated sense of attention of everything around me. It's perceptual learning. There's attention that's been educated. It's all of these things that it's a really hard thing to explain. I hope I'm doing it okay.
No, I think you're doing a great job, and I understand it perfectly. And to me, like for those of us who don't need a BrainPort, I'm wondering, like, how can we do this in our lives? Stand still, make the silence. And I think that's really the message of mindfulness and meditation, is that those are things that all of us can use to train the brain to stand still, to be silent, to stop the noise, and to really be more balanced in a way that is relating to what you're saying.
Right. It's hard for people to stop and just be quiet, especially in these times. I mean, just to be quiet. And I urge anyone that's listening is to try that, is to just stop and pay really close attention to what's around you. How many times have we passed by something and never noticed it?
Wow.
And I think that the world is full of so much of this noise that look what's happened to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can learn and learn to just stop and be quiet, imagine what, not only for yourself, but for everything and everyone around you.
Oh, and Cheryl, we need to stop right there. That is such a powerful place to end, although it is also a very powerful place to keep talking from. But you've just sort of issued a challenge to all of us. What would happen if you just stopped and just built? And I think there's a great blog post there, Cheryl. Cheryl, actually, you have a fantastic blog. Again, if you want to find out more about Cheryl and the rest of her story and more of these kinds of thoughts, you can visit her online at silencingyournoise.wordpress.com. Cheryl, I hope that you'll continue exploring those kind of ideas, because I think they're fantastic and really exciting. And I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today and for sharing not only your story but yourself, which is really, to me, the biggest gift.
Oh, thank you. I am just thrilled to have had this opportunity, and I just appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I also want to congratulate you on all the work that you do. It is so important. What you do makes such a difference in people's lives, Michelle, and I am thrilled to call you my friend, and very honored. And I know you're going to have an upcoming book soon, and that's amazing. I can't wait. That's just good stuff. And thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cheryl. And we'll be in touch because we're friends off the air. So I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care. Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Bye.